Want to go back to the phone lines now, and a very special guest taking out time, knowing he's extremely busy out there. Paul Finebaum on the radio with us, or actually the telephone with us. Paul, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, my pleasure, Brett. What are you guys up to?
Hey, man, we're just talking sports like you do for 4 hours every day, 5 days a week. Paul, let me just first of all say it's amazing that you're one guy, you're on the radio, so many calls coming into your show. Did you ever envision you in a studio by yourself 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, just one call after another?
No, not really. And, it's an interesting question because we've always played around with different concepts, and at times earlier in my career I worked with other people. And it's a little bit scary because there's so many questions, as you know, that you really don't know the answer to, and when you have a co-host like you do here, you can always at least look at the other guy and say, don't you know the answer? And so it is scary by yourself, but another aspect of it is that you're in total control, and it's like being the quarterback without having to look over to the head coach for the plays. I mean, you run the show, and there is some upside in that.
And you're right, Paul, and it is comforting to have a partner over here that you can look to so you don't look like deer in the headlights. But Paul, your show's grown so much, and that's kind of what we want to hit on tonight with you, because we know a lot of people call your show each and every day and talk about the latest in football, especially the SEC, but want to give everybody a little bit of background about you. Of course, your show on Sirius now, and I just want to know from your perspective, what have you seen the changes that have come about in the last few months from you going from a regional show to a national show, Paul?
Well, it's really been phenomenal, and I have to say that I was a little bit nervous about it. I mean, you're always thrilled when somebody gives you an opportunity, but the mountain top or the ride up to the mountain is pretty steep, and if you fall off, you're going to do it in front of everyone. But it's been gradual, but slowly but surely we've heard from people from around the country, and just Alabama and Auburn and SEC fans alone who are either traveling or live somewhere else. So that's how we started, and then we started just picking up various fan bases from around the country. And now, what's really remarkable, we had Randy Edsall on today, the UConn coach, and he was telling us he was on vacation last week driving to Baltimore, and he was listening to us. And Kirk Ferentz from Iowa was telling us a couple weeks ago that he listens. And you think about it, and I don't think it's because we're anything special, but on satellite radio there are very few shows where you can talk college football. You have ESPN, and then you have this station that we're on, and so we get a lot of coaches who listen because they're out there traveling like everyone else, recruiting or driving, and we're about it. So that has been a tremendous boom to us, and as a result, we've been able to get a lot of really big coaches on. We had Bob Stoops and of course Brian Kelly from Notre Dame, and just kind of on down. I mean, obviously the SEC coaches with Saban and Spurrier and Dan Mullen and Urban Meyer, but that has been the biggest change. We've gone more national in our guest list as well.
Paul, are you a little surprised? I know that I listen to you pretty much every afternoon, and so many calls throughout the nation, and I kind of had a feeling before you did this, would Columbus calls come in? Would Morgantown, West Virginia, would those calls come in? But they have seemed to feed right into your program and hasn't had a hiccup whatsoever with your old callers, and they've kind of just added a mesh or kind of something that we didn't expect whenever I think you first started on Sirius.
Well, the guy who was really resistant the most is Charles from Reeltown. He didn't like anybody else calling. He didn't like anybody from Birmingham calling, let alone Columbus, Ohio. So there's been a little bit of that rivalry, and what's happened is that you've had the Alabama and Auburn fans calling in from Alabama, and instead of going after each other, they're now going after Texas or going after Ohio State. So it's been fun, but I really think once we get to the season, it's going to be unbelievable when things really start happening, when Ohio State may or may not lose, or Alabama, we're just kind of going down the list. So one thing you learn about the SEC, I mean, we may hate each other every Saturday, but if the Big Ten picks on us, we're going to unite, and I think that's been really where the show has gone and where it's going right now.
Well, we got Paul Finebaum on the phone with us here from the Paul Finebaum Radio Network. Paul, again, you don't really need any introduction out there because your show's gone national now with Sirius. But I want to ask you a question here. Being in the heart of SEC country and probably in the middle of the biggest rivalry, I know there's some big rivalries out there, Michigan, Ohio State, and we can go on about it, Florida, Florida State, but none other, and I know we look through different glasses here, but Auburn-Alabama game here in the state of Alabama, what has that done for your show? I mean, to me, it's just done leaps and bounds because, I mean, I didn't think it was possible to talk 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, all year long about Auburn and Alabama football, but you guys pull it off.
Well, no. Listen, we're all pretty fortunate to be in this business, and people ask me, what's the key to whatever success you've had, and it's location. It's just like real estate, and you have to try pretty hard, guys, to screw up the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, and I've tried very hard not to, and you just have to let it go, and it can be ridiculous at times, and it can be tedious at times, but it also keeps you in business for about 48 out of the 52 weeks a year. And I've had a really nice career based on that. And people have always said, well, why, have you ever thought about going elsewhere? And I like college football. That's what I do, what I understand, and there's no better place to be. And I know that sounds like I'm just giving the Chamber of Commerce speech, but you guys know I'm telling the truth.
And Paul, one question I have for you, and you've been doing this long enough. Brett and I have been doing it for 4 years, so I'm always intrigued to hear when someone's been doing it as long as you have. Is there one certain event, or is there a set of events that you can attribute the SEC's growth to? Because it seemed like other conferences were right there with the SEC, maybe back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Alabama's always been right up there at the top, but right now, the SEC in football has really taken a step above all the other conferences.
Well, I think for until the 90s, the SEC was primarily Alabama, maybe Tennessee. And that's hard for some people to realize, but in the course of the SEC history, Alabama and Tennessee had always been the two biggest names. In the 90s, it changed, and it changed when Steve Spurrier arrived at Florida. Suddenly, Florida became the hated team, the evil empire, and then you saw Auburn challenge a little bit when Terry Bowden got there, and there's been an evolution, but this decade, the 2000s have been just completely unpredictable because Georgia has won a couple of times, and obviously LSU has 2 national championships, and Florida has come in with 2, and now Alabama. So I think the parity of that has been particularly important, but in terms of the national image, it's really been the last 4 years when we run off this streak of BCS national championships. And until it started with Florida, I think a lot of folks looked at the SEC without tremendous respect. They talked about Ohio State or Oklahoma or Texas or SC, and now it's you can't argue. And I think that's another reason why the show we're doing based out of Birmingham is getting so much attention, because everyone knows who's number one in the country and everyone knows where the best league is.